A suspicious fire claims the life of a small-town family man.
He had been burned very, very badly.
We started looking at surge protectors, the wires and everything. We didn't find anything like that.
You start to run scenarios through your head. Why wouldn't somebody wake up when there was a roaring fire right next to them?
Strange discoveries at the scene create new questions.
Usually you can see a burn pattern, but we didn't see nothing like that.
I start to think maybe they were poisoned.
Propofol is going to cause a person to sleep, and a sufficient concentration can lead to death.
The investigation reveals a family in crisis and a killer who will do anything to keep up appearances.
Her son stated that fights were happening more often. She didn't want people to know the truth.
She wanted to appear to be the perfect family, have the perfect home.
She stated very loudly that if she wanted to get rid of someone, she knew she could.
May 5th, 2018. It's a quiet Saturday morning in Centerville, Iowa. But for one local man, the weekend starts with an unexpected emergency.
Someone was leaving Centerville that morning. As he was leaving town, he drove by South Park and noticed smoke coming from the residence.
Centerville is a real close-knit community. Neighbors help each other out. He stopped, tried to see if there was anything he could do to render assistance.
Uncertain if anyone is inside the home, he calls 911.
Fire department, attention missing fire department. Please respond for mutual aid in Centerville for a house fire.
We knew that this was the home of Tim and Barb Pasa because their kids associated with my kids. As soon as they opened up the door, they was met with a dog that come running out and then heavy black smoke from floor to ceiling. Once they discovered that, they started to advance on down the hallway into the room where they seen some fire in there.
The fire at that point was contained primarily to a master bedroom on the southeast corner of the residence.
We're gonna go check the fire.
The blaze is extinguished before it engulfs the house, but as the smoke starts to settle, firefighters make a gruesome discovery.
They're advising somebody's in there. We need an ambulance. 1033. That's fine.
On the bed, they find the charred remains of a middle-aged man. Although the damage to his body is severe, first responders know the family well enough to recognize the victim is 50-year-old Tim Pasa.
Since we know that there's a body inside of the structure, it changes the content of everything. We got another team together, which ended up doing a search of the entire house because we got more people in here.
Several people tried to make contact with Barb. We didn't know where she was.
They just said that there's 2 kids. Are they accounted for?
We're checking underneath beds. We're checking on top of beds and everything.
We'll go there first. Okay, this room's clear. Bathroom's clear. You're gonna clear. First floor's cleared. We're going to the basement. Copy that. Going to the basement.
We check in all the rooms just to clear and make sure that there's nobody else in the house.
She just said that there's 2 kids, and she was just wanting to make sure that they were accounted for.
They wasn't here. Barb, which was Tim's wife, was not in the house. We radioed that to our command, which is outside, let them know we've done a search and nobody else has been found.
It was shocking to me when I received that news that Tim had passed away. I'd known him for a long time, and when I was younger, just out of high school, we'd all spent a lot of time together. It was definitely not the phone call I expected to get that day.
Timothy Dale Pasa was born and raised in Centerville. He attended the only high school in town where he made lifelong friends.
I went to high school with Tim, and he was just an all-around good guy. He's the youngest of 4 children, I believe. Loved music, loved playing the guitar.
Tim and several other guys would come out to my parents' house and set up in the garage. He played the guitar as good as anybody I'd ever seen.
Music, I believe, was Tim's outlet. He ended up being a lead guitar player in a fabulous country band.
At one of his shows in 1999, Tim hit it off with a 25-year-old local named Barbara Glasscock.
Barb grew up in Centerville and graduated from Centerville High School. She worked as a nurse.
Once I got to know her, it didn't take long to realize that she was funny, she was witty.
She was more outgoing than Tim was. And she had told me that she loved to see him on stage. She loved his demeanor. He was calm to her storm. And that was something that attracted her to him.
Barb started showing up at all of Tim's shows, and the two quickly fell in love.
They got engaged in a few months and then got married. And then they started a family. Their son was in my son's class. And the daughter was also in my other son's class.
Tim was a very present father. He was at every single event that I attended. Anytime we spoke, he bragged up his kids. They were doing this and they were doing that.
Even from T-ball days when they played, he would always be, right at the fence watching and cheering on the boys. He was always involved, and his pride of them just shone through. They were his greatest gift.
Both Tim and Barb worked hard to provide for their growing family.
He was always working. He worked at Lockridge for several years and then became an EMT. And then he became a customer representative for Alliant Energy here in town.
Barb worked for Mercy One Medical Center here in Centerville. She was a nurse in the surgical unit.
I felt that she was a very caring nurse. She always seemed like she wanted to be there. She truly cared about the people she was taking care of.
After 11 years of marriage, the Pasas were doing so well that they bought and remodeled a home in an upscale neighborhood.
Barb and Tim seemed to have a great life, and she was so proud of her home. She always had pictures on Facebook. It seemed to be a well-rounded family.
But now, their picture-perfect life has gone up in smoke. Firefighters have just found Tim's dead body in the smoking ruins. Both the police and fire departments are anxious to know how it happened.
People had been trying to call Barb to let her know that the house was on fire, and she didn't answer them.
Once the fire was contained and extinguished, then firefighters at that point removed the body of Tim Pasa from the residence.
They had a lot of trouble with it just because of the size. Tim was a big individual. I just start looking around the room, see if I see anything else. I noticed a candle on the left side of the bed, which would have been opposite side of where we found the victim at. It was actually down on the floor. That was a little suspicious.
We noticed that a smoke alarm inside the master bedroom area was on the ground. The battery was out of the battery compartment, and the smoke alarm was not melted or burned like you would see in a typical fire. We also noticed on the opposite side of the house a separate smoke alarm between the two kids' bedrooms. The battery compartment was open, making it inactive.
These were just some things that kind of stuck out to me as red flags, because this is not normal stuff that you usually see.
You start to run scenarios through your head and start to try to figure out, what could have happened here? Was it an accident or was it purposefully set?
Coming up, Barb Pasa blames herself for her husband's death.
I said, we found a candle in there. Do you know why it was in there? She said, I lit it.
But an autopsy reveals the shocking truth.
They found no smoke inhalation in Tim's lungs.
On May 5th, 2018, police and fire investigators are working to determine the cause of the deadly blaze that killed Tim Pasa at his home. His wife Barb rushes home after learning about the fire.
People had been calling her, but she said that she didn't have self-service where she was, traveling to the soccer game. Eventually, she did answer one from her daughter, who was on the school bus, had received information, too, that their house was on fire.
Once she did finally arrive on scene, I went and made contact with her and advised her of Tim's death. When I relayed that Tim had passed, Barb didn't seem to have any emotion. I think we all chalked it up to shock and overwhelming situations that morning.
People grieve differently. We don't know what's going through her mind at that time. Officers in the fire department started kind of talking with Barb, trying to put together how the things had transpired before she left. She told them that she had left earlier in the morning to go to her kids' soccer tournament. She had stayed up the night. It would have been Friday night, late, until about midnight. She was baking cookies, but making snacks and things like that to take to the soccer tournament. She went to bed, and then about 5:30 a.m., she woke up, again, started making breakfast for the kids to get them ready for their soccer meet. About 6 a.m., the kids woke up. They had breakfast that Barb had prepared for them.
She said she left the residence between 6:50 a.m. and 7 a.m. that morning. It was predetermined that Tim was not going to go to the soccer match that day. When Barb left the residence, Tim was asleep in bed and snoring.
When they ask Barb if she knows why the smoke detectors were disarmed, she says that was her fault.
She said something had burned while she was in the process of baking and set off the smoke alarms. And so she asked Tim to take the batteries out of the smoke alarms until they could get the smoke cleared out of the room. That made sense. I think most of us have probably done that in our house at some point.
I said, we found a candle in there. Do you know why it was in there? She said, I lit it. I don't remember if it was on the bathroom sink or if I put it on the end table in the bedroom. The reason I put it there and I lit it was because the dog was in there and the dog peed on the carpet and it was kind of covering up the smell.
After answering investigators' questions, Barb asks to see her husband's body.
I explained to Barb that Tim was in the ambulance and that he had been burned very, very badly. She was insistent on spending some time with him.
Barb had told Assistant Chief Moore that, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for a long time. I've seen things like this. This is my husband, and I want to see him before he's taken away. We see that a lot with family members, that they do want to see their loved ones at the scene rather than maybe later at a funeral home.
I decided to let her go into the ambulance, and I gave her a couple minutes to spend alone with Tim.
When she came out, we were waiting for her, and she was very stoic. I just thought she was in shock. She didn't show a lot of emotion, and I was concerned that when she broke, it was going to be bad.
Anytime there's a death where it's not under doctor supervision, an autopsy is going to be completed to determine the cause of death, to get the answers needed. When I told Barb that an autopsy would be conducted, she became almost mad that it was going to be conducted and she had no say in that. I thought Barb's reaction to that was not typical. I just felt that maybe she was being overwhelmed with everything that had gone on that morning.
Despite Barb's reservations, Tim's body is transported to a funeral home in preparation for the autopsy.
Barb had said she was going to her mom, she was taking the kids there, and that she would be staying there.
At that point, we were not able to determine if the fire was started because of the candle or if it had any relevance to the fire. But we knew where the items were found and located, and it was just something suspicious in nature.
I went back in to look on the end table to see if I could see the markings where the candle actually was setting before it was, in case it was moving up. I could not find it, so it was really, really puzzling to me. We start looking at all the electronic surge protectors, the wires and everything. They look and see if there's any possibility of where that stuff could have shorted out. In this case, we didn't find anything like that.
The fire marshal determines that the candle Barb Pasa put in the bedroom isn't to blame either.
He had told us that, in his opinion, that the fire had burned rapidly, more so on top of the bed, and is also on the side of the bed where Tim was sleeping, which was the opposite side of where this candle was.
Investigators face another mystery.
In a situation like that, whenever there's fire, especially if it's on your person or it's somewhere, you're going to be moving to get away from it.
Even if a smoke alarm didn't go off, the smoke, the heat, and the flames would have woken somebody up. And there was no indication that that happened. And that was another little part of an investigation that piques your interest as to why. Why wouldn't somebody wake up when there was a roaring fire right next to them? Things just kind of started looking a little more suspicious.
3 days after the fire that claimed the life of Tim Pasa, Centerville authorities are hoping an autopsy will provide answers.
The one big question is what is the autopsy going to show us as far as the nature and the cause of death? As part of that autopsy, they do a full examination of the body. They wanted to make sure that there were no obvious signs of death, such as stab wounds, bullet wounds, in general like that. All of those things were ruled out.
While there are no immediate signs of foul play, the medical examiner does note something unexpected.
They found no smoke inhalation in Tim's lungs. That was the key piece of information that we were looking for, because for that to happen, Tim had to have been deceased before the fire.
Barb had told us that when she had left the residence, Tim was asleep in bed and snoring. That was not possible. Tim was already deceased when she left the residence. There was no natural reason, no indication of bad health or heart attack or any such nature. Now we need to determine what actually took place that morning.
That completely changes our investigation into a homicide investigation.
In light of this development, police wonder if Barb's lack of emotion at the scene wasn't shock, but the reaction of a guilty conscience.
You start putting these pieces together that is going to start moving us towards a criminal investigation. I start to think of, well, something had happened to incapacitate them where they were not able to wake up. Maybe they were poisoned. It was determined that Barb was diabetic, and so we did find a lot of diabetic medication, insulin, syringes throughout the house.
We informed the medical examiner of the vials of insulin that were found at the residence and gave him that information to try to locate in the toxicology report insulin in Tim's body. At that point, they were not able to locate any insulin in the toxicology.
As far as investigators are concerned, Barb is now a person of interest in a potential murder. The question is, what reason could she have to want her husband dead?
Later that night, I was contacted by a family member of the Pasas who advised me that Tim and Barb's son wished to speak with me in regards to the fire and Tim's death. I agreed to meet with Tim and Barb's son later that evening at the Law Center in Centerville. He advised that the evening before the fire, him and his father, Tim, had gone on a walk together, and Tim had expressed to him that they were going to be getting a divorce and that was going to be taking place sooner rather than later. Tim and Barb's son was very distraught and upset. He stated that it hadn't been good for quite some time, that fights were happening more often than not. It was apparent that he truly believed that Barb may have had something to do with Tim's death.
I've been around Centerville my whole life, and there's been very few intentional homicides in this community. But the original picture that you have starts to change. From what we saw at the very beginning to where we were now was substantially different.
Coming up, a marriage on the brink of disaster.
We probably lived paycheck to paycheck. We got behind on our mortgage and had to refinance.
And detectives find the smoking gun.
That conversation led the laboratory to test for a drug called propofol.
Officers now have a suspect in the fiery murder of Tim Pasa, his wife of 18 years, Barbara Pasa. To understand her motive, detectives need to know just how deep the problems in their marriage go.
Generally, you want to speak with friends and family members and try to see what you can come up with. One of those in particular was Sonia Carson. She had reached out and she had some information that she thought maybe we would want to know.
I knew Barb all through when she was in school. 2004, 2005 is when we became closer friends. Barb and Tim were never an affectionate couple. Even when the kids were younger, they never were one to touch each other or show affection. I just thought that was Barb's demeanor. She wasn't really an emotional person. And I think if she would have been more affectionate, Tim would reciprocate that.
According to Sonia, Tim and Barb's relationship continued to deteriorate over the years.
I think they stayed together for the kids, but, primarily just for them. And I think Barb, she did not want to have a marriage that ended in divorce. In her eyes, she would have felt like she wouldn't be accepted or that she wouldn't be able to do things with us as couples as we sometimes did because of our children.
Their relationship seemed to reach a breaking point in 2018, 2 weeks before the fire.
We had gone out to eat one evening, and there were 3 of us, and we were just sitting there talking about, life, our kids, our husbands, and out of the blue, she stated very loudly that she was very upset with Tim. She talked about a pending divorce and how she was concerned if the kids would actually want to stay with her or if they would want to be with Tim, and she was concerned about their finances.
I think she really wanted people to know how much she was giving or how much she was doing. I believe she was trying to portray herself to be the perfect mom and the perfect family.
Barb always wanted the kids to have the best of everything. And, they drove nice cars. They had newest shoes or whatever that they wanted. She also spent a lot of time shopping for herself and also for friends. Spending money was one of her favorite things to do. She continued to become more upset about it and said that she hated him. She said it with a lot of emotion, and that if she wanted to get rid of someone, she knew she could. When she said that, I kind of chuckled because I thought, I'm sure we've all been mad at our husbands and have said that. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought she was venting.
Investigators wonder if Barb decided to make good on her threat.
We found documentation showing that the house was about to go into foreclosure. We saw credit card bills that were way past due. Barb had maxed out Tim's life insurance from $50,000 to $200,000. That had happened approximately 5 months prior to this incident. We were also able to determine that she had increased the amount on the homeowner's insurance for the residents. Knowing how far Barb and Tim were in a financial struggle, Tim was worth a lot more to her dead than alive. She was going to, quite frankly, make a good payday upon his death.
Barb's motive seems clear, but there is still no direct evidence she had anything to do with Tim's death.
A lot of it was circumstantial evidence. We needed to try to get Barb to answer our questions and tell us the truth about what took place that morning.
Investigators ask Barb to come in for a more formal round of questioning.
Hi, Barb.
Hi.
You can sir. You better not sit that close to me.
I don't think you smell pretty good.
We wanted to get a baseline from Barb about her relationship with Tim and the family setting. Barb did admit that her and Tim had talked for quite some time about getting a divorce, but that financially she didn't know how that would work.
We probably lived paycheck to paycheck. We got behind on our mortgage and had to refinance, and some creditors.
Were you guys able to find common ground at least to get that handled?
He handled the bills for a while, and then he got tired of it and kind of half-assed handed them back to me.
Aside from confirming what police already know, Barb is not very forthcoming.
She was fine speaking with us about the relationship and the financial situation, but when we pressed her about the morning of the fire, she just started to close up.
What was the breaking point for you?
I don't have anything to say. I didn't have a breaking point.
You understand where I'm coming from?
I do.
Right? You watch the TV shows. You're in the medical field. You know they're going to be able to do toxicology and figure out what happened with him. That's going to come back on you. The fire didn't destroy his body. That's going to come back to you, and then it's just going to be evidence. I'm here so I can understand. Take me through it. What led up to that decision? Because we know...
There was no decision.
She asked to stop the interview. She told them that she wanted to go speak to her children and talk to them, and then she would come back.
It was my belief that she knew at that point that she was caught, and she wanted to tell the kids what took place before she admitted to what she had done. Prior to Barb leaving the law center the day of the interview, we executed the search warrant of her vehicle and also seized her cell phone for a search warrant to be conducted on the cell phone.
The following morning, while waiting for Barb to return, investigators receive a shocking call.
At approximately 8 in the morning, dispatch received a 911 call from the mother's residence advising that Barb was having seizure-like symptoms. I recognized the address and I went to the location and observed Barb was overdosing. At that point, she was transferred to a hospital in Des Moines.
Barb had taken some type of overdose of medications. She was kept for about 10 days under observation.
Of course, in a small town, people are talking. A lot of people questioned, is she grieving? Is it because she's so heartbroken? But at this point, even though it was a few short days after Tim's passing, it was pretty evident that most people believed that it was because she was guilty of a crime that she'd committed.
With Barb Pasa in the hospital recovering from an overdose, police focus on finding evidence that she orchestrated her husband's death.
After the initial autopsy report and toxicology test did not reveal anything, we asked for an additional toxicology test to look further into other substances that may have been in his body.
The case history was that Barbara Pasa was a nurse in a medical field and had access to some of the drugs that are specifically used for anesthesia. That conversation led the laboratory to test for a drug called propofol.
Propofol is a fast-acting drug that is most commonly used to sedate patients undergoing surgery.
The injection of propofol is going to cause a person to sleep, and it can also affect the heart and lower blood pressure. It can cause an individual to stop breathing, and a sufficient concentration can lead to death.
The amount of propofol found in Tim's body was 0.18 milliliters, which is not something that a normal person would have in their system.
That analytical finding is the propofol that's present in the blood. It doesn't go to show you where the propofol is present in other parts of the body. So the finding in the blood does not account for the propofol dose that was administered.
We did interviews. We were able to determine that Tim was not a drug user. Tim was not in the medical field.
It's clear to investigators that Barb was the only person in the Pasa household that had direct access to propofol.
They spoke with hospital officials. When propofol is used, if it's in a vial and say it's 10 milliliters and they only used 5, it can only be used one time, so it was thrown in the trash.
Barb's job in the surgical center was to then dispose of those containers. The containers are such that Barb would be able to reach in and grab the small vial of propofol, stick it in a pocket, and no one would know anything different.
With Barb's access to the drug confirmed, investigators re-examine her timeline. On the morning of the fire, Barb told police she left the house a little before 7 a.m., more than 30 minutes before the fire was reported. But when police reach out to Barb's coworker, Megan DeCina, she says otherwise.
On the morning of May 5th, as I was driving to work, I happened to notice that Barb's vehicle was at home. I knew it was her vehicle based on the personalized plates that she had that spelled out Pasa.
Megan has an app on her phone that she uses for her work, and it tracks where she's at certain times. She showed us this app, and it showed that she had been by that house at about 7:22 that morning. About 10 minutes later, 7:33 or thereabouts is when the 911 call was made that there was smoke coming out of the house. That's a pretty short period of time for somebody to be there and then gone, and that also starts to tell me that fire might have been going for a while before she actually left the house.
Detectives are able to track her movements after leaving the house using her financial records.
That morning, she had gone to a ATM location here in Centerville and withdrew $200 from that ATM. We were able to also get video from that ATM, which proved it was Barb and that she was in her vehicle at 7:25 a.m. in Centerville. So having all this evidence between the autopsy, the interview, the different statements, the financial information, all led us to Barb was not being truthful with us and that Barb was involved in the death of Tim and the fire at the residence.
Armed with more solid evidence, Investigators present their case to the district attorney.
I think Barb was in a bad place financially. She wanted to appear to be the perfect family, have the perfect home, the perfect cars. And I think it got to the point where she was not going to be able to uphold that appearance. And that's why she did what she did.
Barb snapped because she didn't want people to know the truth. She didn't want them to know that her life was not as it was portrayed. So based on our investigation in this case, we believe that sometime in the early morning, Barb was able to inject Tim with propofol. Once that took place, Barb then decided to try to destroy all possible evidence.
If we suspect that it was arson or whatever, usually you can see a burn pattern, but we didn't see nothing like that. So I believe that she stacked stuff up on top of him, let it be clothes, pillows, or whatever, started it on fire. I believe her intent was to burn the house down or burn it along resignation where you couldn't see what was happening and then leave.
At this point, we believe we had enough probable cause to make an arrest for the murder and the arson.
While investigators have been gathering evidence, Barb Pasa has been in a hospital bed recovering from an overdose. When she's released on May 18, 2018, officers are waiting to arrest her.
Barb was placed under arrest and charged with the murder of Tim Pasa as well as arson.
It's a small town, so you start hearing things, about, well, I heard there was no smoke in his lungs and things like that. So when I heard that she'd got arrested, I was not surprised at all. I really wasn't. Angry, yes. Surprised, no.
Barb's trial begins on September 17, 2019, more than a year after the crimes took place.
Barb pleaded not guilty. At that point, she was looking at life in jail without parole on just the murder alone, plus the arson charges.
But prosecutors know their case is still largely circumstantial.
You have to convince the full jury, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the person that was charged committed the crimes that were alleged. We didn't have video of Barb lighting the fire. We have to prove that the information we have, based off of all of our investigation, leads to nobody else. It had to be her.
According to the defense, police arrested the wrong person.
One of the defenses that Barb tried to use was that her neighbor, who is also a nurse and deals with anesthesiologists, was someone that could have possibly entered the residence and injected Tim with the propofol.
There just was nothing that we found that ever showed he was involved in it.
It was determined that he actually left at 5:30 that morning of the incident to head to Des Moines for a conference. He was not around that day.
Barb chose to take the stand in her defense. She did show some emotion throughout her testimony, which was not similar to what we had seen throughout this investigation. She talked about in her previous marriage that she had lost a child at some point, which definitely is a traumatic experience.
I think she truly wanted to convince people that she was not the evil person that everybody knows that she is, by saying that she could not do that to her children or do that to Tim.
The tears that she was given, all phony. The entire thing was phony.
The question for the jury, is whether or not they believe her.
The jury ended up deliberating for approximately 3 hours, came back with guilty verdicts for first-degree murder and first-degree arson, which ultimately gave Barb a life sentence plus 20 years.
In my opinion, this woman is a psychopath. Lucky for us, she's not a very smart psychopath. If she was as smart as she thought she would, Tim would have had smoke in his lungs. She didn't think that part out.
I think as a community, it kind of maybe opened some eyes a little bit more, knowing that maybe everything isn't exactly how it's portrayed.
Even though she got sent to prison for murder and arson, that was not a win. It's very sad that these children lost a father and a mother both. And the kids will remember this forever, and it's just a very, very sad ordeal.
All of them had a common interest in music. Hopefully they still do. I think they do. But he could have nurtured that a lot more had he been around and been involved with their life. And she robbed him of that.
Tim should be remembered for the great dad he was and for the connections he had with his kids and just how proud he was all the time of them. He would be beyond proud of the lives they're living and all their successes.
The cool, pre-dawn silence of a quiet Saturday morning in Centerville, Iowa on May 5th, 2018, typically promise nothing more than the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant, familiar chime of a church bell. For many of its residents, Centerville embodied the idyllic spirit of a small, interconnected community, where lives were intertwined not just by proximity, but by a shared history, by generations of families who knew one another, their joys and sorrows echoing through its tree-lined streets. It was a place where neighbors helped each other out, where a familiar face was a given at the local grocery store or high school football game. Yet, on this particular morning, this peaceful facade was about to be shattered by an unexpected emergency, an event that would irrevocably alter the lives of several families and cast a long, unsettling shadow over the very fabric of Centerville's close-knit world. This idyllic setting, usually a haven of predictable tranquility, was about to become the backdrop for profound investigation into a human tragedy, one that would challenge deeply held assumptions about appearances and the true nature of domestic life. A suspicious fire claimed the life of a small-town family man, an event that instantly cast a pall over the morning, turning the routine into the horrific. The victim, known and loved in this intimate community, had been burned very, very badly. The sheer, devastating extent of the burns presented an immediate and profoundly challenging obstacle for investigators, as such damage could obscure crucial forensic details vital for understanding the sequence of events leading to death. The initial response, therefore, was meticulous and systematic, a methodical effort to rule out the most common and often tragic causes of accidental fires. We, as seasoned professionals, started looking at surge protectors, the wires, and everything else that could potentially ignite such a destructive blaze. This initial phase of any fire investigation is critical, a methodical sweep to eliminate the obvious and allow the more subtle, more sinister possibilities to surface if the conventional explanations prove inadequate. We scrutinize every connection, every appliance, every electrical conduit, seeking any telltale sign of an overloaded circuit, a faulty wire, or a malfunctioning device that could inadvertently turn a home into an inferno. The thoroughness of this early examination sets the foundation for all subsequent inquiries, ensuring no stone is left unturned in the search for the truth, however painful that truth might prove to be. With an almost unsettling uniformity, and to our growing concern, We didn't find anything like that. No frayed cords, no scorch marks around outlets, no melted plastic from an electrical overload. The absence of these commonplace accidental causes immediately shifted the entire paradigm of our investigation. It was no longer a straightforward case of determining the ignition source for a fire. Now, a profound and deeply unsettling question began to percolate through the minds of every experienced officer and fire investigator present. You start to run scenarios through your head, not just about the fire itself, but about the human element, the victim. The most pressing and perturbing query became, why wouldn't somebody wake up when there was a roaring fire right next to them? It defies basic human instinct, the primal urge for self-preservation that is triggered by intense heat, acrid smoke, and the searing agony of encroaching flames. This immediate lack of response from a living, conscious individual trapped in such a violent, destructive event was a jarring anomaly, a red flag that hoisted itself to the very top of our internal manifest of suspicious circumstances. Indeed, strange discoveries at the scene created new questions, each one peeling back another layer of what initially seemed to be a tragic accident, revealing instead the potential shadow of something far more premeditated and chilling. The fire's behavior itself, as meticulously observed by seasoned fire marshals, also deviated significantly from established patterns typically seen in accidental blazes. Usually, in a spontaneous fire, you can discern a clear burn pattern, a road map of the fire's progression, indicating its point of origin and the direction it spread, often with charring intensifying upwards in a V-shape. But in this case, we didn't see nothing like that. The absence of conventional, discernible burn pattern in the immediate vicinity of the victim was highly unusual, suggesting an unnatural propagation of the flames or, more sinisterly, a targeted application. This further compounded the psychological anomaly of the victim's unresponsiveness. The confluence of these irregularities, the silent victim and the strange burn dynamics, began to converge into a terrifying hypothesis within the minds of the investigative team. I, speaking as an analyst of criminal behavior, started to think maybe they were poisoned. This suspicion wasn't plucked from thin air. It was a logical leap driven by the totality of perplexing evidence. If the victim was already incapacitated or deceased before the fire started, it would perfectly explain the absence of any struggle or attempt to escape. Such a scenario immediately directs attention toward a range of potential incapacitating agents. While specific poison was not yet identified, the very idea planted a seed of foreboding. Later, with precise forensic testing, the terrifying specificity would emerge. Propofol is going to cause a person to sleep and induce coma that bypasses all sensory alarms, and in sufficient concentration can lead to death. This fast-acting anesthetic, potent and insidious, would prove to be the linchpin of a horrifying crime, revealing the chilling precision of its execution. The ensuing investigation, meticulously peeling back the layers of a carefully constructed facade, quickly began to reveal a family in crisis, a stark contrast to the perfect image Pasa had meticulously cultivated. This mounting tension and unraveling domesticity, often hidden from public view, became a crucial element in understanding the emerging criminal narrative and in identifying a killer who would do anything to keep up appearances. The psychological profile of such an individual suggests a profound fear of exposure, a desperate clinging to a fabricated reality that dictates their most extreme actions. It was not mere speculation. Direct testimony corroborated these hidden struggles. Her son, grappling with the unthinkable trauma of losing his father to fire and facing the horrifying prospect of his mother's involvement, stated that fights were happening more often than not within the home. This domestic disharmony, though suppressed and rarely visible to the outside world, was the raw, unvarnished truth of their reality, chipping away at the foundation of Barb's desired perfect image. She didn't want people to know the truth. The fear of social judgment, of falling short of an idealized standard, became a suffocating burden, dictating her behavior and shaping her monstrous choices. The motivation wasn't simply to avoid casual gossip. It was a deeper, more pathological need. She wanted to appear to be the perfect family, have the perfect home, maintain a flawless, almost theatrical presentation of her life to her community. This obsession with external validation, with public perception, became a driving force, pushing her to extraordinary and ultimately lethal lengths. This psychological compulsion to uphold an immaculate image, even as her private life was in disarray, hinted at profound internal struggle between her reality and her delusion. This deep-seated need to control how she was perceived had, tragically, festered into a dangerous mindset. In a particularly chilling and foreshadowing incident, shared by a close friend who retrospectively recalled the chilling utterance, Barb stated very loudly and with alarming intensity that if she wanted to get rid of someone, she knew she could. At the time, such a remark might have been dismissed as an outburst of anger or hyperbolic venting, the kind of frustrated pronouncement one might make in moments of extreme pique. But in the harrowing light of subsequent events, these words took on a terrifying, premonitory weight, revealing not just a fleeting emotion, but perhaps a calculated, nascent thought of cold-blooded capability. This boastful confidence, revealing a disturbing sense of power and control over another's life, stood as a chilling testament to her psychological state, a disturbing harbinger of the monstrous crime to come. The tranquil fabric of Centerville, Iowa, a community bound by familiarity and shared lives, was irrevocably torn on the quiet Saturday morning of May 5, 2018. The early hours of that day, typically reserved for the gentle awakening of a small town, were shattered by an unexpected emergency, an event that would unravel the illusion of perfect lives and expose a darker reality beneath. For one local man, the weekend started with this profoundly unexpected emergency. He was engaged in the ordinary routine of someone leaving Centerville that morning, beginning his journey under the serene sky. As he drove by South Park, a familiar landmark in the heart of the town, his practiced eye, accustomed to the comforting predictability of his surroundings, noticed something acutely out of place, an ominous sign that pierced the morning calm. He saw smoke coming from a residence. This wasn't the harmless wisp of a chimney or the casual tendril from a backyard burning. This was dense, dark, and purposeful smoke, a visual alarm bell signaling immediate and profound distress. Centerville, a real close-knit community, prides itself on a deep-seated ethos of mutual support and neighborly care. It is a place where neighbors help each other out, often without needing to be asked. True to this spirit, the man's first instinct was not to simply observe and continue on his way. He stopped his vehicle, immediately compelled by a genuine desire to offer assistance. Uncertain if anyone was inside the home, and knowing that precious moments could mean the difference between life and death, he swiftly made the critical decision. He calls 911, his voice conveying the urgency of the unfolding situation, transforming a quiet observation into an official emergency. The dispatch, receiving the critical information, broadcast the urgent message. Commanding Fire Department, please respond to mutual aid in Centerville, warning house fire. This declaration was the formal beginning of a harrowing morning for the small town. The address, once conveyed, immediately sparked recognition among the emergency responders. We knew that this was the home of Kim and Barb Pasa because their kids associated with my kids. One firefighter recalled, underscoring the deep interwoven connections of Centerville. In this small community, lives were not just adjacent but truly intertwined, meaning personal knowledge often preceded official reports. As soon as the initial responding teams opened up the door, they were met with a startling and chaotic scene. A dog, disoriented and frightened by the smoke, came running out, a blur for escaping the inferno. Behind it, a far more ominous sight, heavy black smoke billowing from floor to ceiling, a suffocating shroud that enveloped the entire entryway. The visibility was near zero, and the heat was intense. instantly signaling the severity of the fire. Once they discovered that profound initial hazard, and after the animal had safely fled, the firefighters, trained and disciplined, immediately started to advance on down the hallway, their focus unwavering, their thermal cameras cut through the oppressive darkness, guiding them towards the heart of the blaze. They seen some fire in there, primarily contained to a master bedroom on the southeast corner of the residence. The rapid isolation of fire to a single room, even a master bedroom, suggested a concentrated origin, or perhaps an earlier, more controlled state before it escalated. This specific containment, while a positive for the rest of the structure, would later become another puzzling detail in the larger mosaic of the investigation. With a commendably swift and expert response, the blaze was extinguished before it could fully engulf the house, preventing even wider destruction to the Pasa home and potentially to neighboring properties. However, as the dense, acrid smoke slowly started to settle, revealing the stark, charred reality of the interior, firefighters made a gruesome discovery, one that instantly shifted the entire nature of their operation from a fire suppression effort to a potential crime scene. On the bed, amid the burnt wreckage of bedding and furniture, they found the severely charred remains of a middle-aged man. The sight was horrifying, deeply unsettling to even the most seasoned first responders. Although the damage to his body was severe, an almost complete transformation that could hinder identification for outsiders. The tight-knit nature of Centerville again provided immediate clarity. First responders knew the family well enough to recognize the victim as 50-year-old Tim Pasa. The grim identification sent a shiver through the ranks, adding a profoundly personal layer to the tragedy unfolding before them. Since we know that there's a body inside of the structure, it changes the content of everything, one of the lead investigators later articulated, highlighting the instantaneous transformation of their mission. What began as a tragic fire incident had abruptly, profoundly, and irrevocably become a potential criminal investigation. All protocols immediately shifted to reflect this gravity. We swiftly assembled another team, specifically designated for a more expansive and methodical examination. We got another team together, which ended up doing the search of the entire house, because we got more people in here, the investigator emphasized, underscoring the urgent deployment of additional resources and expertise. The paramount concern at this juncture, beyond securing the scene, was to ascertain the presence and safety of other family members. A pressing question immediately arose regarding Barb, Tim's wife. Several people tried to make contact with Barb, dialing her number, sending messages, hoping for a rapid response. But their efforts met with a deafening silence. We didn't know where she was. Her unexplained absence became a palpable source of concern, amplifying the already immense tension at the scene. This spurred the second team into immediate action, executing a comprehensive and systematic sweep of the entire residence, a painstaking, room-by-room search for any other occupants. We're checking underneath beds. We're checking on top of beds and everything. We're checking all the rooms just to clear and make sure there's nobody else in the house. The investigator explained, outlining the exhaustive, systematic search. Each door opened, each closet peered into, each curtain drawn back brought a fresh surge of apprehension. The search eventually concluded with a definitive, though deeply worrying, finding. They wasn't here. Barb, which was Tim's wife, was not in the house. This critical piece of information was immediately radioed to the command post position outside, relaying the full scope of their findings. We radioed that to our command, which is outside. Let them know we've done a search and nobody else has been found. The news deepened the mystery, adding another unsettling layer to the already grim and complex unfolding tragedy. The news of Tim Pasa's death ripped through Centerville like wildfire, leaving a profound and indelible mark on the community. It wasn't merely the loss of a life. It was the loss of a well-known, well-loved individual, a person deeply interwoven into the fabric of the town. It was shocking to me when I received that news that Tim had passed away. I'd known him for a long time, recounted one close acquaintance, expressing a sentiment shared by many. The memories of Tim were vivid and numerous, spanning decades of shared experiences within the close-knit community. When I was younger, just out of high school, we'd all spent a lot of time together. The friend continued, reminiscing about the carefree days of youth that forged deep and lasting bonds. The phone call that delivered the devastating news was, for many, an unbearable intrusion of tragedy into predictable rhythm of small-town life. It was definitely not the phone call I expected to get that day, the friend concluded, summing up the jarring, deeply unsettling nature of the event. Timothy Dale Pasa was more than just a resident. He was a true son of Centerville, born and raised within its familiar boundaries, a testament to the deep roots of his family in the community. He attended the only high school in town, a common experience that often binds generations of locals together, forging lifelong friendships that would stand the test of time and distance. I went to high school with Tim, and he was just an all-around good guy. One former classmate recalled with sincere affection, painting a picture of a universally liked and respected individual. He was the youngest of 4 children, a position that often bestows a unique combination of playful energy and a deeply observed appreciation for family dynamics. But perhaps his most enduring passion, the creative current that flowed through much of his life and identity, was a profound love for music. He loved playing the guitar with an almost innate talent and a joyful dedication that quickly garnered admiration. Many evenings during his youth and young adulthood, Tim and several other kindred spirits would gather at his friend's parents' house, seeking a creative outlet for their shared passion. They would set up their instruments in the garage, transforming the utilitarian space into a vibrant, impromptu concert hall, their melodies spilling out into the Centerville night. He played the guitar as good as anybody I'd ever seen, his friend declared, a powerful endorsement of Tim's exceptional musical prowess. For Tim, music was far more than a casual hobby. It was an essential part of his being, a sanctuary for his emotions and expressions. The music, I believe, was Tim's outlet, his friend thoughtfully reflected, understanding the profound personal connection Tim had with his instrument and his craft. This dedication, nurtured over years of practice and performance, eventually led to remarkable recognition within the regional music scene. He ended up being a lead guitar player in a fabulous country band, a source of immense pride not just for Tim, but for his entire Centerville community, who relished seeing one of their own achieve such notable artistic success. It was amidst the vibrant energy of one of the performances, in the year 1999, that fate orchestrated a pivotal meeting. Tim, then deeply immersed in his musical passion, connected with Barbara Glascock, a 25-year-old local woman. Barb, like Tim, had deep roots in Centerville, having grown up there and proudly graduated from Centerville High School. Her professional life was anchored in a highly respected field. She worked as a nurse, a career demanding both skill and compassion, suggesting a person committed to care and professionalism. The initial spark between them was quickly fanned into a more profound affection, marking the beginning of a significant chapter in both their lives. Once I got to know her, it didn't take long to realize that she was funny, she was witty, a friend recalled, offering insights into Barb's engaging personality and quick intelligence. She possessed a more outgoing and vivacious personality than Tim, who was generally calmer and more reserved. This contrast, rather than creating friction, seemed to draw them together, forming a complementary dynamic. Barb herself had confided to friends her deep admiration for Tim's stage presence and his overall demeanor. She loved his demeanor, the friend added, articulating a key aspect of her attraction to him. He was calm to her storm, and that was something that attracted her to him. It was a classic tale of opposites attracting, finding balance and harmony in their distinct personalities. Barb, deeply captivated by Tim's musical talent and gentle nature, started showing up at all of Tim's shows, her consistent presence becoming a familiar and welcome sight. Her admiration for him, both as a musician and a man, quickly blossomed into a deep, mutual affection, and the two swiftly fell in love. Their romance progressed with a charming speed, leading to an engagement within a few short months, followed by marriage. Shortly after, they started a family, their children becoming the central focus of their lives, and further cementing their ties to Centerville. The intertwining of their family with the community was immediate and natural, as their children quickly became schoolmates with the children of their friends and neighbors. Their son was in my son's class. The daughter was also in my other son's class. A fellow parent recounted, illustrating the ubiquitous interconnectedness of life in Centerville. Tim embraced fatherhood with an open heart and an unwavering dedication that shone through in every interaction. He was, by all accounts, a remarkably present father, a man who prioritized his children's lives and experiences above almost all else. He was at every single event that I attended, a friend confirmed, a powerful testament to his commitment to his children's sporting events, school plays, and any other activity that touched their lives. Any time he spoke, his face would light up with unreserved affection and pride. He unfailingly bragged up his kids, delighting in their accomplishments, however small. They were doing this and they were doing that, his friends would recall, remembering the genuine joy in his voice. Even from the earliest T-ball days, a stage of youthful exuberance and developing skills, he would always be right at the fence watching and cheering on the boys, a constant, encouraging presence. He was always involved, and his pride of them just shone through. They were his greatest gift. This wasn't merely a platitude. It was a deeply held conviction, evident in every interaction, every supportive gesture, every shared moment. His children truly were the center of his universe, a source of immeasurable joy and fulfillment. Both Tim and Barb were deeply committed to building a stable and prosperous life for their growing family, demonstrating a commendable work ethic that resonated with the values of their Centerville community. He was always working, his diligent efforts underscoring his dedication to his loved ones. He worked at Lock Ridge for several years, a local establishment, before transitioning into the demanding yet deeply rewarding role of an emergency medical technician, a profession that spoke to his innate desire to help others in moments of crisis. Later, he moved to a more stable, customer-facing role, becoming a customer representative for Alliant Energy right there in Centerville, ensuring a steady income and secure employment. Barb, too, was a committed professional. She worked for Mercy One Medical Center, a significant regional healthcare provider also located in Centerville, where she served as a dedicated nurse in the surgical unit. Her professional reputation among colleagues and patients alike was exemplary. I felt that she was a very caring nurse, one person shared, acknowledging her compassionate approach. She always seemed like she wanted to be there. She truly cared about the people she was taking care of. Her commitment to her patients and her profession seemed on the surface unwavering and deeply humanistic. After 11 years of marriage, the Pasa family seemed to be flourishing, a testament to their combined efforts and dedication to their shared aspirations. Their hard work and careful planning appear to have paid off handsomely, culminating in a significant milestone for many families. They bought and extensively remodeled a home in an upscale neighborhood. This move was not just a change of address. It was a powerful symbol of their upward mobility, their perceived success, and their commitment to providing a beautiful, comfortable environment for their children. Barb, in particular, took immense pride in their newly renovated home, a physical manifestation of her idealized life. She frequently shared pictures on Facebook, meticulously curating an online persona of domestic bliss, showcasing its immaculate interiors, stylish decor, and overall sense of prosperity. She always had pictures on Facebook. It seemed to be a well-rounded family, a friend observed, recalling the carefully crafted digital image. From an outsider's perspective, they indeed appear to have a great life, a picture-perfect family, enjoying the fruits of their collective labor in a beautiful home within a supportive community. But now, with a gut-wrenching suddenness, their picture-perfect life had gone up in smoke, both literally and figuratively. Firefighters had just made the horrific discovery of Tim's dead body in the smoking ruins, and the once pristine home, the symbol of their success, was now a grim testament to devastation, and, as suspicions mounted, perhaps something far more sinister. Both the Centerville Police Department and the local fire department were intensely anxious to know how this unthinkable tragedy had happened, their immediate focus shifting from extinguishing a blaze to unraveling a profound and deeply disturbing mystery. As the smoke began to clear and the initial shock of the discovery permeated the scene, one detail immediately stood out as profoundly perplexing and deeply concerning: Barb's inaccessibility. People had been desperately trying to call Barb, reaching out to her on her cell phone, attempting to alert her to the unfolding disaster at her home. Yet, to every attempt, she didn't answer them. This unresponsiveness, initially attributed to simple circumstance, began to accrue a layer of suspicion in the minds of the investigators. Once the immediate peril of the fire was contained and extinguished, the solemn and physically demanding task of retrieving Tim Pasa's body from the devastated residents began. Then firefighters at that point removed the body of Tim Pasa from the residence. A grim task that underscored the human cost of the blaze. The physical challenges were not insignificant. They had a lot of trouble with it just because of the size. Tim was a big individual. A first responder recounted, detailing the physical efforts involved in the solemn recovery. With Tim's body removed, attention shifted back to the room itself. An arena of devastation that now held secrets beyond the simple narrative of an accidental fire. I, as an investigator trained to scrutinize every detail, began my methodical sweep. I just start looking around the room and see if I see anything else. A crucial phase that transforms chaos into potential evidence. Amidst the ashes and debris, my eyes immediately registered an anomaly. I noticed a candle on the left side of the bed, which would have been opposite side of where we found the victim at. This specific placement, while not immediately damning, was unusual. What made it particularly suspicious was its exact location. It was actually down on the floor. A lit candle falling to the floor could be an accidental fire starter. However, its distance from the most intense burn patterns on the bed would eventually become a point of contention and further suspicion. The examination then broadened to the safety mechanisms that should have protected the home. Another critical and profoundly unsettling discovery followed. We noticed that a smoke alarm inside the master bedroom area was on the ground. But its mere presence on the floor wasn't the sole concern. It was its disarmed state. The battery was out of the battery compartment, and the smoke alarm was not melted or burned like you would see in a typical fire. This was highly irregular. A functional smoke alarm should have been either activated by the smoke and heat or demonstrably destroyed by the intense conditions of the fire. Its intact state, coupled with the missing battery, was an immediate red flag. Compounding this anomaly, investigators made another similar discovery on the opposite side of the house. Between the two children's bedrooms, a separate smoke alarm there also had a critical malfunction. The battery compartment was open, making it inactive. These were not minor oversights. They were deliberate acts that rendered critical safety devices useless. These were just some things that kind of stuck out to me as red flags because this is not normal. Stuff that you usually see, the investigator confessed, voicing the immediate unease that began to solidify into profound suspicion among the teams. Such findings defy the usual parameters of accidental fires and point towards deliberate intervention. When confronted with such clear discrepancies, the investigative mind shifts gears. You start to run scenarios through your head and start to try to figure out, what could have happened here? The crucial pivot occurred The question was no longer simply what caused the fire, but who? It wasn't an accident, or was it purposely set? The silent, unsettling implications of this question began to reshape the entire framework of the investigation. The narrative paused, leaving the immediate questions hanging in the air, allowing the audience to ponder the growing suspicions. Coming up, Barb Pasa blames herself for her husband's death. The script teased, promising an explanation that would initially seem plausible, but would ultimately only deepen the mystery. I said, "We found a candle in there. Do you know why it was in there?" She said, "I lit it." Barb's chillingly calm confession of responsibility for the candle would offer a potential ignition source, yet proved to be a carefully constructed half-truth. However, the most profound and ultimately damning revelation was yet to be unveiled. A scientific certainty that would shatter any remaining illusion of accidental tragedy. But an autopsy reveals a shocking truth. They found no smoke inhalation in Tim's lungs. This single, irrefutable forensic detail will become the undeniable cornerstone of the homicide investigation, transforming a seemingly tragic house fire in Centerville, Iowa on May 5, 2018, into a carefully concealed act of murder, irrevocably altering the fate of the victim and his deceptive spouse. On May 5, 2018, as the sun climbed higher, casting its bright, impartial light upon a scene of devastating loss in Centerville, Iowa, police and fire investigators worked with relentless dedication. Their mission had shifted profoundly from containing a blaze to painstakingly determining the precise cause of the deadly fire that had tragically claimed the life of 50-year-old Tim Pasa within his own home. In the midst of this controlled chaos, Barb, Tim's wife, a figure of significant interest, finally arrived on scene. She rushed home after learning about the fire, her belated appearance itself having become a subtle point of initial scrutiny for the attentive investigators. Her initial inaccessibility had been notable. People had been trying desperately to call her, attempting to deliver the devastating news. Barb's explanation for her unresponsiveness was that she hadn't had cell service where she was, as she had been traveling to her kids' soccer game. A perfectly plausible explanation for many parts of rural Iowa. However, the sheer volume of urgent calls eventually broke through. Eventually, she did answer one, a call from her daughter, who was on the school bus, having already received information from others that their house was on fire. This was the moment Barb received the full, terrible news. Once she did finally arrive on scene, amidst a lingering scent of smoke and the subdued activity of emergency personnel, a lead detective went and made direct contact with her. He approached her with a somber professionalism, a necessary protocol for delivering such grim tidings, an advisor of Tim's death. His trained eye, however, registered something unusual in her immediate reaction. When I relayed that Tim had passed, Barb didn't seem to have any emotion. The detective recounted later, recalling the moment with a keen, almost clinical observation. In such profoundly tragic circumstances, an outburst of grief, shock, or despair is a commonly expected, often overwhelming human response. Yet, Barb's demeanor was conspicuously placid. Despite this, the investigative team, ever mindful of the diverse nature of human grieving, initially afforded her the benefit of the doubt. I think we all chalked it up to shock and overwhelming situations that morning. People grieve differently. We don't know what's going through her mind at that time. The detective elaborated, reflecting the initial, charitable interpretation of her composure. This rationalization, while compassionate, served as a foundational crack in the edifice of her perceived innocence. A hairline fracture that would later widen under the relentless pressure of a murder investigation. Following this initial, brief exchange, officers and fire department personnel, aiming to reconstruct the crucial hours leading up to the blaze, started a dialogue with Barb. Their objective was to piece together how things had transpired before she left the residence that morning, attempting to build a coherent timeline from her perspective. Barb, maintaining her outward composure, provided a seemingly detailed account of her morning. She told them that she had left earlier in the morning to go to her kids' soccer tournament, a typical weekend parental duty. The previous night had been a busy one, marked by domestic preparations. She had stayed up late, enduring what would have been Friday night, extending her efforts until about midnight, baking cookies, making snacks, and preparing various provisions to take to the soccer tournament. She eventually went to bed. Her day had begun early, at about 5:30 a.m., when she woke up again and, with what she described as maternal dedication, started making breakfast for the kids to get them ready for their soccer meet. Approximately 30 minutes later, about 6 a.m., the kids woke up and they all had breakfast that Barb had prepared for them. She then claimed she left the residence between 6:50 a.m. and 7 a.m. that morning. An important detail in her narrative was that it was predetermined that Tim was not going to go to the soccer match that day, providing a reason for his presence in the house after her departure. Furthermore, and crucially for her narrative, she asserted that when she left the residence, Tim was asleep in bed and snoring, implying he was alive and well when she departed. The next line of questioning pivoted to the disarmed smoke detectors, a detail that had profoundly unsettled the initial fire investigators. When they directly asked Barb if she knew why the smoke detectors were inactive, she readily offered an explanation, taking responsibility and providing an account that, on its surface, held a degree of relatable plausibility. She said that something had burned while she was in the process of baking the previous night, an unfortunate but common kitchen mishap, which had consequently set off the smoke alarms. To silence the irritating noise and clear the air, she claimed, she had asked him to take the batteries out of the smoke alarms until they could get the smoke cleared out of the room. That made sense. I think most of us have probably done that in our house at some point. The investigator admitted, acknowledging the universality of such an action. This explanation, while superficially compelling, would later be scrutinized for its consistency with other emerging facts. The conversation then moved to the mysterious candle found near the bed. I said, "We found a candle in there. Do you know why it was in there?" the detective inquired, probing for a specific explanation for this peculiar object in a fire-damaged bedroom. Barb's response was immediate and unhesitating. She said, "I lit it." She did, however, express a slight uncertainty regarding its exact placement before the fire, wavering between two potential locations. "I don't remember if it was on the bathroom sink or if I put it on the end table in the bedroom." But her reason for lighting it was clear and seemingly innocuous. "The reason I put it there and I lit it is because the dog was in there and the dog peed on the carpet," she explained, offering a domestic detail to justify the candle's presence, implying it was an odor eliminator, and it was kind of covering up the smell. Barb's narrative, constructed with precise sequence of events and plausible explanations for every anomaly discovered thus far, painted a picture of accidental misfortune, skillfully deflecting any suspicion from herself. After patiently and calmly answering the investigators' numerous questions, Barb, with a sudden shift in focus, made a request that, while common among grieving families, took on a particular hue of complexity in her context. She asked to see her husband's body. The lead detective, sensitive to potential trauma of such a sight, explained to Barb that Tim was in the ambulance and that he had been burned very, very badly. It was an attempt, both compassionate and cautious, to prepare her for the horrific reality of his condition. Yet, Barb was unwavering in her insistence on spending some time with him. Her resolve, seemingly unshakable, she drew upon her professional identity to bolster her request, asserting a level of resilience and understanding not typically expected from a civilian. Barb had told the assistant chief more that, "I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for a long time. I've seen things like this," she declared, emphasizing her capacity to cope with such a grim sight. "This is my husband, and I want to see him before he's taken away." This profound desire from grieving family members to witness their loved one at the scene even amidst horrific circumstances, was a phenomenon the responders understood. We see that a lot with family members, that they do want to see their loved ones at the scene rather than maybe later at a funeral home. The assistant chief confirmed, lending professional validity to Barb's demand. Given her steadfast insistence and her stated professional experience, the decision was made to grant her request. I decided to let her go into the ambulance, and I gave her a couple minutes to spend alone with Tim, he recalled, creating a private moment for her. When she emerged from the ambulance, her composure remained conspicuously unbroken. When she came out, we were waiting for her, and she was very stoic. The absence of overt, visceral grief continued to strike the observers as profoundly unusual, yet the prevailing interpretation remained one of shock. I just thought she was in shock. She didn't show a lot of emotion, and I was concerned that when she broke, it was going to be bad. The expectation was a delayed, overwhelming outpouring of grief, a breaking point that, at this stage, remained elusive. The conversation then shifted to mandatory next steps in any non-supervised death. Anytime there's a death where it's not under doctor supervision, an autopsy is going to be completed to determine the cause of death. To get the answers needed, the investigator explained, outlining the immutable legal and investigative protocol. It was a standard procedure, non-negotiable and essential for discovering the true nature of Tim's demise. However, when a detective informed Barb that an autopsy would be conducted, her reaction sharply deviated from her previous, controlled stoicism. She became almost mad that it was going to be conducted, and she had no say in that. This outburst of anger and frustration, directed at a routine and necessary procedure, was deeply puzzling to the investigative team. I thought Barb's reaction to that was not typical. Yet, once more, they attempted to contextualize her seemingly disproportionate response within the framework of her recent trauma. I just felt that maybe she was being overwhelmed with everything that had gone on that morning. The benefit of the doubt was extended, but the internal notes of suspicion continued to accumulate. Despite Barb's pronounced reservations and anger, the legal and medical necessity for an autopsy remained absolute and unwavering. Consequently, Tim's body was respectfully transported to a local funeral home, where the detailed forensic examination would be meticulously performed. Before her departure, Barb informed the officers of her immediate plans. She was going to her mom's, taking the children there, and stated that she would be staying there for the foreseeable future. With Barb's immediate whereabouts established, investigators returned their focus to the perplexing physical scene of the fire, particularly the role of the candle. At that point, we were not able to determine if the fire was started because of the candle or if it had any relevance to the fire, the detective admitted, acknowledging the ongoing uncertainty surrounding the exact ignition source. However, the presence and location of several items remained deeply suspicious in nature, suggesting intentionality rather than accident. Driven by a persistent sense of unease regarding the candle's alleged origin point, an investigator returned to the master bedroom for an even more meticulous forensic examination. His aim was to locate definitive evidence that would corroborate Barb's account. I went back and looked on the end table to see if I could see the markings where the candle actually was setting before it was, in case it was moving up. If a candle had been burning on the end table and subsequently fallen, there should be residual evidence, a distinct circular burn mark, melted wax adhering to the surface, or at the very least, a clear imprint. However, despite his thorough search, a critical piece of corroborating evidence was absent. I could not find it, so it was really puzzling to me. This specific absence, the lack of an evident resting place for the candle, where Barb claimed it had been, directly undermined her explanation and further intensified the investigators' growing suspicion regarding the true origins of the fire. With the candle's role increasingly murky, the investigative team diligently cast a wider net, methodically exploring other common sources of accidental ignition. We start looking at all the electronic surge protectors, the wires, and everything the investigator detailed, outlining the exhaustive, systematic approach to eliminating potential electrical faults. Every single power strip, every cord, every electronic device in the room was meticulously examined, probed, and tested. They looked and see if there's any possibility of where that stuff could have shorted out, as electrical malfunctions are a frequent cause of residential fires. Yet, despite their diligent and comprehensive efforts, the results remain consistently negative. In this case, we didn't find anything like that. No faulty wiring, no evidence of an overloaded circuit, no electrical arcing, no short circuits. The meticulous elimination of both the candle as a plausible source and electrical failures as potential culprits meant that accidental causes were rapidly dwindling, leaving a more unsettling void. The fire marshal, an expert steeped in the intricate science of fire dynamics and burn patterns, provided his authoritative assessment, further challenging Barb's narrative. His specialized analysis conclusively determined that the candle Barb Pasa had claimed to have put in the bedroom for the innocent purpose of odor masking wasn't to blame for the intensity and location of the devastating fire that claimed Tim's life. He had told us that in his opinion that the fire had burned rapidly, more so on top of the bed, and is also on the side of the bed where Tim was sleeping, which was the opposite side of where this candle was, the investigator conveyed. This critical piece of expert testimony meant the candle's placement was entirely inconsistent with the primary burn patterns, physically discrediting Barb's attempt to assign an accidental, candle-induced origin to the inferno. The fire had raged most fiercely on and immediately around Tim's body, far from where the dislodged candle was found. Beyond the specific mechanics of the fire's origin, investigators faced another, more profoundly disquieting mystery, a mystery rooted in basic human physiology and instinct. The overwhelming sensory input of fire, the intense heat, the suffocating smoke, the searing pain of encroaching flames, should, by all laws of human biology, provoke a powerful and immediate response from a conscious individual. In a situation like that, whenever there's fire, especially if it's on your person or somewhere, you're going to be moving to get away from it, the investigator emphasized, highlighting the primal survival reflex. Even with the smoke alarms deliberately disarmed, an act in itself highly suspicious, the sheer intensity of the event should have served as an undeniable, forceful awakening. Yet, critically, there was no indication that that happened. There were no signs of struggle, no defensive wounds, no movements consistent with an attempt to escape or fight the flames. This inexplicable passivity on the part of the victim was a glaring inconsistency. That was another little part of an investigation that piqued your interest as to why. Why wouldn't somebody wake up when there was a roaring fire right next to him? The question, chilling and profound, resonated with growing unease among the investigators. The accumulation of these glaring anomalies, the disarmed smoke detectors, the inexplicable burn patterns, the perfectly intact body despite severe external charring, and the utterly passive victim, converge into a single, terrifying conclusion. Things just kind of started looking a little more suspicious. The possibility of a tragic accident was rapidly being replaced by the undeniable shadow of premeditated evil. 3 days after the fire that claimed the life of Tim Pasa, Centerville authorities were clinging to a singular, critical hope that an autopsy would finally provide definitive answers to these escalating and profoundly disturbing questions. The entire Centerville community held its breath. 3 days after the horrific fire claimed the life of 50-year-old Tim Pasa, leaving his home a scene of devastation and prompting far more questions than answers, authorities were placing immense hope on the autopsy report. This critical medical examination was the last bastion of clarity, the ultimate arbiter of truth that could pierce through the growing veil of suspicion. The one big question was, what is the autopsy going to show us as far as the nature and the cause of death? The lead detective articulated, summarizing the paramount importance of the impending forensic findings. As an integral component of any death investigation not occurring under medical supervision, a full and meticulous examination of the body was meticulously performed by forensic pathologists. Their initial goal was comprehensive. They wanted to make sure that there were no obvious signs of death that pointed toward a more conventional act of violence, such as stab wounds, bullet wounds, or any other gross trauma generally indicative of physical assault. The initial external examination and subsequent internal findings methodically explored these possibilities, to the growing consternation of the investigators who sought clarity. All of those things were ruled out. No immediate, conventional signs of foul play, no obvious physical trauma beyond the fire's effects were readily apparent. This seemingly blank slate, however, only intensified the mystery surrounding Tim's death, pushing the inquiry deeper into the subtle, the scientific, and the insidious. Yet, despite the absence of clear external signs of violence, the medical examiner's detailed internal examination yielded a discovery so unexpected, so profoundly significant, that it instantly recharted the entire course of the investigation, irrevocably shifting it from an inquiry into accidental death to a full-blown murder probe. The finding was both simple and catastrophic. They found no smoke inhalation in Tim's lungs. This was a critical, undeniable forensic truth. For any individual alive and breathing during a fire, the inhalation of smoke, soot, and toxic gases is an inevitable physiological response, leaving behind unmistakable evidence in the lungs. The utter absence of such evidence was irrefutable. That was the key piece of information that we were looking for, the detective explained, his voice now imbued with grim certainty. Because for that to happen, Tim had to have been deceased before the fire. The scientific conclusion was absolute. Tim Pasa was not breathing when the fire started. He was already dead. This forensic truth starkly and horrifyingly contradicted Barb's carefully constructed narrative. She had told investigators, with unsettling composure, that when she had left the residence, Tim was asleep in bed and snoring. That was not possible, the detective stated, the implications of his words resonating with chilling finality. Tim was already deceased when she left the residence. Further medical investigation yielded no natural explanation for Tim's death. There was no natural reason, no indication of bad health or heart attack or any such nature. His heart was strong. His vital organs showed no signs of acute distress. The picture was now tragically, undeniably clear. Tim Pasa had been murdered, then burned to obscure the original crime. Now we need to determine what actually took place that morning, the detective declared, understanding the profound shift in the nature of their case. That completely changes our investigation into a homicide investigation. The veil of tragic accident had been definitively ripped away, revealing a meticulously planned and shockingly executed murder. In light of this seismic and utterly horrifying development, the initial observations of Barb's seemingly emotionless demeanor at the fire scene underwent a profound and chilling reinterpretation. What was once charitably ascribed to shock, to the overwhelming nature of traumatic grief, now took on a far more sinister meaning. Police began to wonder if Barb's lack of emotion at the scene wasn't shock, but the carefully composed reaction of a guilty conscience. Her calm, almost attached recounting of events, her subtle resistances to standard procedures, now appeared not as innocent confusion, but as deliberate attempts to control the narrative and divert suspicion. You start putting these pieces together, that is going to start moving us towards a criminal investigation, the detective observed, outlining the undeniable convergence of circumstantial evidence with hard forensic facts. His mind, trained in the nuances of criminal psychology, immediately began to construct alternative scenarios, focusing on methods that would explain the victim's incapacitation. I started to think of, well, something had happened to incapacitate them where they were not able to wake up. The primary, most insidious means of achieving such an effect without overt physical violence, was poisoning. Maybe they were poisoned. This hypothesis, while terrifying, quickly led investigators down a logical, if circuitous, path. They knew that Barb was diabetic, a piece of information that resonated with some of the preliminary observations at the crime scene. During the initial cautious sweep of the residence, amidst the chaos and damage, we did find a lot of diabetic medication and insulin syringes throughout the house. These were, on the surface, ordinary domestic items belonging to Barb, consistent with managing her medical condition. However, with the new poisoning theory in mind, these items took on a darker potential. Investigators immediately informed the medical examiner of the vials of insulin that were found at the residence and gave him that information, hoping it would guide the forensic toxicology. The request was specific, to try to locate in the toxicology report insulin in Tim's body. The theory was that a massive, incapacitating dose of insulin, especially in a non-diabetic, could lead to a comatose state and eventually death. However, this promising avenue of inquiry eventually reached a dead end. At that point, they were not able to locate any insulin in the toxicology. The detective confirmed. The initial poisoning theory, while validated in its concept of incapacitation, had not yet identified its precise agent. Regardless of specific substance, the shift in focus was profound and definitive. As far as investigators were concerned, Barb was now unmistakably a person of interest in a potential murder. Her husband's death was no longer an accident. The terrifying question that now drove every aspect of the ongoing inquiry was singularly focused. What reason could she have to want her husband dead? The seemingly perfect facade of their family life had been shattered by the grim reality of homicide, demanding a deeper probe into the psychological underpinnings of Barb's actions. The answers began to surface, not from a laboratory, but from a deeply personal, human source, further unraveling the illusion Barb Pasa had so carefully constructed. Later that very night, amidst a whirlwind of forensic results and investigative theories, a critical breakthrough emerged. Later that night, I was contacted by a family member of the Pasa family who advised me that Tim and Barb's son wished to speak with me in regard to the fire and Tim's death, the detective recounted. The immediate willingness of the son, still grappling with unspeakable trauma, to engage with law enforcement, spoke volumes about the underlying family dynamics. I agreed to meet with Tim and Barb's son later, that evening at the Law Center in Centerville. The interview was a delicate one, dealing with a child who had lost his father and was now, terrifyingly, being asked to consider the unthinkable about his mother. During their deeply personal conversation, the son, in a state of profound distress, revealed information that dramatically rewrote the family's narrative, shattering the carefully curated image of a happy home. He advised that the evening before the fire, he and his father, Tim, had gone on a walk together, a tender, intimate moment that now carried immense, tragic weight. During this walk, Tim had confided a deeply painful truth to his son. They were going to be getting a divorce, and this life-altering separation was going to be taking place sooner rather than later. The son, predictably, was very distraught and upset as he recounted this emotional revelation. He elaborated, stating that the marriage hadn't been good for quite some time, and that bitter fights were happening more often than not within the home. The domestic discord, carefully hidden from public view, was a constant, corrosive presence. The raw, unfiltered emotion from the son was heartbreaking, and his conviction profound. It was apparent that he truly believed that Barb may have had something to do with Tim's death. The psychological weight of this familial betrayal was immense, coloring his perception and guiding his statements. For the veteran Centerville detective, who had witnessed countless community narratives, this particular case struck a deep chord. I've been around Centerville my whole life, and there's been very few intentional homicides in this community, he reflected, highlighting the profound rarity and shock value of such a calculated act of violence in their peaceful town. The initial, comfortable picture of Centerville, the quiet family, the accidental tragedy, was rapidly, unsettlingly transforming. But the original picture that you have starts to change. From what we saw at the very beginning to where we were now, it was substantially different. The case had shed its skin of misfortune and revealed the chilling, calculating face of murder, propelled by deep-seated personal conflict and a shocking willingness to betray the most fundamental of bonds. The investigation, no longer confined to the ashes of a house, had delved into the ashes of a marriage, a home, and a carefully constructed illusion, all converging on the dark figure of Barbara Pasa. The unfolding narrative then sharpened its focus, promising further revelations that would strip away the remaining vestiges of illusion. Coming up, a marriage on the brink of disaster. The financial pressures, previously an unspoken burden hidden behind a veneer of prosperity, were about to be exposed as a powerful, motivating factor. Barb Pasa's own admissions would reluctantly confirm the underlying struggle. We probably went paycheck to paycheck. We got behind on a mortgage and had to refinance. These glimpses into her desperate reality would explain the seemingly unthinkable actions to come. Then, the ultimate forensic victory, the precise, scientific revelation that would finally seal the fate of the killer. And detectives find the smoking gun. That conversation led the laboratory to test for a drug called propofol. This discovery will be the irrefutable, undeniable piece of the puzzle, tying the murder directly to Barb's professional access and chilling premeditation. Officers now had a primary suspect in the fiery murder of Tim Pasa, his wife of 18 years. Barbara Pasa. The path to conviction required not just the physical evidence, but a deep, incisive understanding of her psychological landscape. To truly understand her motive, detectives knew they needed to know just how deep the problems in their marriage actually went, what underlying currents had driven a woman to such an extreme act. This wasn't merely about solving crime. It was about unraveling a deeply complex human tragedy. The general approach in such investigations, particularly when delving into domestic dynamics, is to broaden the net of inquiry, seeking corroboration and context from those closest to the situation. Generally, you want to speak with friends and family members and try to see what you can come up with. A lead detective explained, outlining the standard methodology. Among the numerous individuals reached out to, one particular source proved invaluable, stepping forward with information that added crucial depth to their understanding of Barb's character and the marital breakdown. One of those in particular was Sonia Carson. She had reached out, and she had some information that she thought maybe we would want to know. The detective noted, underscoring Sonia's willingness to cooperate. Sonia Carson's connection to Barb stretched back many years. I knew Barb all through when she was in school, she began, establishing the long-standing nature of their acquaintance, rooted in their shared Centerville upbringing. Their friendship deepened considerably later, with Sonia stating, 2004, 2005 is when we became closer friends. Through years of observation, Sonia had gained intimate insights into the dynamics of the Pasa marriage, observations that defied the external illusion. Barb and Tim were never an affectionate couple, Sonia revealed, a stark contrast to the expected warmth of a committed relationship. Even when the kids were younger, they never were one to touch each other or show affection, a persistent characteristic that spoke to a fundamental lack of intimacy. Sonia initially rationalized this outward coldness by attributing it to Barb's innate personality. I just thought that was Barb's demeanor. She wasn't really an emotional person. And in a poignant observation, she mused, and I think if she would have been more affectionate, Tim would reciprocate that, suggesting that Tim was perhaps starved for emotional connection within his own marriage. According to Sonia's poignant observations, Tim and Barb's relationship did not improve over the years. Instead, it continued to deteriorate, gradually but inexorably, leaving them adrift in a sea of emotional distance. Sonia, with her unique insight, believed their primary reason for remaining together was rooted in external pressures and the perceived welfare of their children. I think they stayed together for the kids, primarily just for them, she mused, identifying the heartbreaking, unspoken pact many unhappily married couples make. But beyond the children, Barb had a profound, almost pathological aversion to the social stigma associated with divorce, a powerful motivator in maintaining her perfect facade. And I think Barb, she did not want to have a marriage that ended in divorce. In her self-constructed worldview, such a failure would signify a complete social downfall, a catastrophic blow to her carefully curated image. In her eyes, she would have felt like she wouldn't be accepted or that she wouldn't be able to do things with us. As couples as we sometimes did because of our children, Sonia explained, illuminating Barb's deep-seated fear of social ostracization and her desperate need to uphold an idealized version of her life. This meticulously maintained pretense reached its undeniable breaking point in 2018, a mere 2 weeks before the devastating fire that claimed Tim's life. Sonia recounted a profoundly unsettling incident, a raw, unvarnished outpouring of Barb's anger and despair. We had gone out to eat one evening, and there were 3 of us, and we were just sitting there talking about, life, our kids, our husbands. It was a seemingly innocuous conversation, the comfortable chatter of friends, until Barb abruptly seized control of the narrative. And out of the blue, she stated very loudly that she was very upset with Tim. The sheer volume and intensity of her voice, unexpected in such a setting, immediately captured her friend's attention. She spoke openly about a pending divorce, a stark departure from her usual guardedness, laying bare her profound anxieties about the future. She talked about a pending divorce and how she was concerned if the kids would actually want to stay with her or if they would want to be with Tim. The prospect of losing her children's loyalty or custody was clearly a significant source of emotional distress for Barb. Furthermore, she openly expressed deep concern about their precarious financial situation, another critical pressure point threatening her carefully constructed image of prosperity. Sonia, possessing a perceptive understanding of Barb's underlying psychological needs, believed that her friend's disclosures, while seemingly candid, were not solely for genuine solace or shared vulnerability. I think she really wanted people to know how much she was giving or how much she was doing. Sonia hypothesized, sensing Barb's pervasive need for recognition and validation for her perceived sacrifices. I believe she was trying to portray herself to be the perfect mom and the perfect family. This desperate drive to maintain an immaculate public image fueled many of Barb's behaviors, including her extensive spending habits, a silent testament to her material desires and the constant pressure she placed upon herself to provide the best for her family. Barb always wanted the kids to have the best of everything, and, they drove nice cars. They had newest shoes or whatever that they wanted. Her self-indulgence was also notable. She also spent a lot of time shopping for herself and also for friends, perhaps using these material expressions as a substitute for deeper emotional connections, or as another way to signal her perceived success. Indeed, spending money was one of her favorite things to do, an observation that revealed a superficial approach to happiness and security. The emotional intensity of that dinner conversation escalated further, transforming from an expression of frustration into a chilling and, in retrospect, truly terrifying premonition. Barb's anger and resentment toward Tim mounted to a boiling point. She continued to become more upset about it and said that she hated him. The word hated was not a casual remark. It was uttered with a lot of emotion, conveying the profound, visceral depth of her animosity towards her husband. And then came the truly alarming, prophetic statement, delivered with a disturbing sense of cold confidence, and that if she wanted to get rid of someone, she knew she could. Sonia's immediate reaction, understandable at the time, was to dismiss it as hyperbolic venting, the kind of exaggerated statement a frustrated spouse might utter in a moment of extreme anger. When she said that, I kind of chuckled because I thought, I'm sure we've all been mad at our husbands and have said that. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought she was venting. This casual dismissal, however, would later take on a terrifying and deeply sorrowful significance, revealing profound and chilling insight into Barb Pasa's capacity for violence. Investigators, however, had the chilling benefit of hindsight, forcing them to seriously consider whether Barb had indeed decided to make good on her shocking threat. The search for a powerful, compelling motive led them deep into the Pasa family's financial records, where they uncovered a devastating picture of imminent financial ruin. We found documentation showing that the house was about to go into foreclosure, an investigator confirmed, outlining the grim reality that directly contradicted Barb's carefully maintained image of prosperity. They meticulously scrutinized various financial accounts and credit statements, revealing a cascade of unpaid bills and overdue obligations. We saw credit card bills that were way past due. The financial struggles were not superficial. They represented a deep-seated and overwhelming burden, a desperate struggle to keep up appearances despite being buried under a mountain of debt. Most damningly, the financial investigation revealed Barb's specific, strategic actions regarding Tim's life insurance policy, actions that spoke volumes about her ultimate intent. Barb had maxed out Tim's life insurance from $50,000 to $200,000, the detective revealed, outlining a fourfold increase that presented an immense financial incentive. The timing of this policy change was acutely suspicious. That had happened approximately 5 months prior to this incident, placing the alteration just before the murder. Furthermore, this pattern of financially advantageous adjustments extended beyond life insurance alone. We were also able to determine that she had increased the amount on the homeowner's insurance for the residents. The objective was unmistakable: to maximize the financial payout upon Tim's death. The stark economic reality, laid bare by these financial maneuvers, was undeniably clear to the investigators. Knowing how far Barb and Tim were in a financial struggle, Tim was worth a lot more to her dead than alive. The detective concluded with a chilling directness. She was going to, quite frankly, make a good payday upon his death. Barb's motive, now illuminated by both her desperate financial predicament and her veiled, threatening declarations, seemed horrifyingly clear. However, despite this compelling body of circumstantial evidence, investigators still lacked a singular, undeniable direct proof that she had actively, physically caused Tim's death. The curt array of evidence, while strongly pointing to her culpability, remained largely indirect. A lot of it was circumstantial evidence, the detective acknowledged, recognizing the challenges inherent in presenting such a case in court. To move towards a definitive arrest and conviction, they required a more direct confrontation, an opportunity to penetrate Barb's carefully constructed defenses and extract the truth. We needed to try to get Barb to answer our questions and tell us the truth about what took place. That morning, the time had come for a more formal and confrontational interview, designed to break through a facade of innocent ignorance. With a meticulously prepared strategy, investigators formally asked Barb to come in for a more structured and formal round of questioning, moving beyond the informal inquiries of the fire scene to a deliberate interrogation within the confines of the law center. The atmosphere was palpably different. The pretense of a tragic accident had been definitively stripped away, replaced by the stark, unyielding reality of a murder investigation. The interrogation began with an attempt to establish a foundational understanding of her relationship with Tim and the overall family setting, aiming to first gain a baseline before moving into more challenging territory. The entire exchange was meticulously recorded, preserving every nuance, every hesitant answer, every telling gesture. The interviewing officer attempted to put her at ease with a seemingly innocuous, even humorous opening. "Hi, Barb, because there are people that don't sit that close to me. He's not very deaf," he said, indicating another officer in the room. This light approach, however, barely scratched the surface of the underlying tension. Barb, maintaining a carefully guarded demeanor, did eventually admit that her and Tim had talked for quite some time about getting a divorce, thereby corroborating Tim's earlier conversation with his son. However, she emphasized her deep-seated anxieties about the financial ramifications, but that financially she didn't know how that would work, she stated, reiterating the practical, material impediment to dissolving the marriage. She then, perhaps strategically, painted a picture of shared financial hardship, attempting to universalize their struggles. We probably looked paycheck to paycheck. We got behind on her mortgage and had to refinance, and some creditors, she recited, detailing their perilous economic state. When pressed by the interrogator, were you guys able to find common ground at least to get that handled? Barb's response was telling, betraying a dynamic of resentment and a sense of uneven burden distribution within the marriage. He handled the bills for a while, and then he got tired of it and kind of half-ass handed them back. To me, aside from confirming information police already largely knew, Barb remained largely guarded, not very forthcoming when the discussion began to pivot to the critical timeline of the fire. She was perfectly willing, almost eager, to speak with the officers about the broader aspects of her relationship and the financial difficulties, perhaps viewing these as avenues for garnering sympathy or rationalizing her eventual actions. Barb was fine speaking with us about the relationship and the financial situation, the detective observed. But the moment the questions began to specifically target the morning of the fire, the very hours surrounding Tim's death, she visibly retreated, her composure hardening. But when we pressed her about the morning of the fire, she just started to close up, he noted, indicating a sudden, deliberate erection of emotional and verbal barriers. Sensing her retreat, the interrogator, applying carefully calibrated pressure, pushed for a breakthrough, trying to expose the emotional trigger that might have led to such an extreme act. "What was the breaking point for you?" he inquired, his voice direct and probing. Barb's responses became evasive, almost defiant, indicating a complete unwillingness to cooperate on this critical point. "I don't have anything to say. I didn't have a breaking point." The detective, now armed with the irrefutable autopsy results, escalated the pressure, reminding her of the undeniable scientific facts. "Do you understand why I'm coming?" he challenged, his voice conveying the seriousness of her situation. "I do," Barb replied, her voice taut, revealing the strain beneath her guarded exterior. The interrogator laid out the undeniable truth, the weight of forensic science. "You're in the medical field. You know, they're going to be over in South College and figure out what happened, and that's going to come back on you. The fire didn't destroy his body. That's going to come back to you, and then it's just going to be evidence." He emphasized the incontrovertible nature of the evidence, the scientific certainty that pointed directly to her. "I'm here so I can understand," he pleaded, offering a final chance for her to confess. "Take me through what led up to that decision, because we know there was no decision." At this critical juncture, facing the undeniable implications of the evidence arrayed against her, Barb abruptly capitulated to the pressure. She asked to stop the interview, unable to maintain her composure or her carefully constructed facade any longer. She told them that she wanted to go speak to her children and talk to them, and then she would come back, the detective recalled, noting her immediate focus shifted to her children. The detective's immediate and telling interpretation of her sudden request revealed a deep insight into her criminal psychology. It was my belief that she knew at that point that she was caught, and she wanted to tell the kids what took place before she admitted to what she had done. It was a desperate, almost pathetic attempt to control the narrative one last time, to soften the inevitable blow for her children before her guilt became public knowledge. A final manipulation in the face of absolute exposure. Even as Barb Pasa abruptly concluded her interview and prepared to leave the Lost Center, investigators swiftly and decisively moved to secure additional evidence. Prior to Barb leaving the Lost Center the day of the interview, We executed the search warrant of her vehicle, meticulously examining its contents for any item, however small, that might corroborate their growing body of evidence. Simultaneously, and even more critically, they also seized her cell phone for a search warrant to be conducted on the cell phone. This crucial step was designed to access digital data, call logs, messages, location services, internet searches that could provide invaluable insights into her movements and state of mind. Leading up to and during the crime, these immediate actions, executed with legal precision, underscored the urgency and gravity of the investigation, leaving no digital stone unturned. The following morning, as investigators patiently awaited Barb's promised return for continuation of her interview, they received an utterly unexpected and profoundly shocking call. A new crisis born from the existing tragedy. At approximately 8 in the morning, dispatch received a 911 call from the mother's residence, Barb's own mother's home where she had taken the children, advising that Barb was having seizure-like symptoms. The lead detective, recognizing the address and connecting it immediately to their ongoing person of interest, rushed to the location. His immediate observation tragically confirmed his suspicions. I recognized the address and I went to the location and observed Barb was overdosing. It was a desperate, transparent act, a deliberate attempt to evade the crushing weight of her imminent arrest and the terrifying public exposure of her monstrous crime. At that point, she was transferred to a hospital in the morning. Barb had taken some type of overdose of medications, a calculated, if tragically misguided maneuver to escape the legal and emotional consequences she was facing. She was subsequently kept for about 10 days under observation, a period of forced medical intervention that temporarily stalled the legal process but solidified public perception. The news of Barb's overdose naturally spread like wildfire through Centerville, a town where even minor events quickly become the subject of widespread discussion. Of course, in a small town, people are talking, the investigator acknowledged, understanding the swift dissemination of such sensitive information. Initial reactions were, perhaps, mixed, with some clinging to a last shred of empathy for a woman who had seemingly suffered immense loss. A lot of people questioned, is she grieving? Is it because she's so heartbroken? This benign interpretation, however, quickly dissolved under the weight of the mounting evidence and the increasing whispers from the ongoing investigation. But at this point, even though it was a few short days after Tim's passing, it was pretty evident that most people believed that it was because she was guilty of a crime she committed. The narrative in Centerville had firmly shifted. The public had reached its own painful verdict, perceiving her act not as grief, but as a desperate attempt to avoid accountability for a horrific crime. With Barb Pasa now confined to a hospital bed, slowly recovering from her calculated overdose, the police, rather than idling, redoubled their efforts, their focus unwavering, finding irrefutable scientific evidence that would undeniably confirm Barb's orchestration of her husband's death. The initial autopsy report, while critical in revealing the complete absence of smoke inhalation, thereby proving Tim was deceased before the fire, and the preliminary toxicology test had not yet pinpointed the precise incapacitating agent. This presented a temporary challenge, but one that seasoned investigators were prepared to overcome through persistent forensic inquiry. A crucial decision was made to broaden the scope of the toxicological analysis. After the initial autopsy report and toxicology test did not reveal anything, we asked for an additional toxicology test to look further into other substances that may have been in his body. The detective explained, outlining the meticulous, systematic approach of modern forensic science. The investigative team revisited their existing information, particularly Barb's professional background, a detail that now assumed immense significance. The case history was that Barb Pasa was a nurse in the medical field and had access to some of the drugs that are specifically used for anesthesia, the detective reiterated, highlighting the pivotal clue that connected Barb to a potential method of incapacitation. This specific piece of background information proved to be the pivotal insight. That crucial conversation between law enforcement and the forensic laboratory proved to be the moment of revelation, guiding the scientists toward the truth. That conversation led the laboratory to test for a drug called propofol. Propofol is a remarkably potent, fast-acting drug, recognized globally and almost exclusively utilized within medical settings to sedate patients, undergoing various surgical procedures or in intensive care. Its efficacy lies in its rapid induction of unconsciousness, acting as a powerful anesthetic. The injection of propofol is going to cause a person to sleep, the detective explained, detailing its primary, immediate effect. Beyond simply inducing sleep, its potent pharmaceutical properties also extend to critical physiological systems, profoundly affecting the cardiovascular and respiratory functions. And it can also affect the heart and lower blood pressure, he continued, describing its systemic impact. Critically, especially in higher concentrations or when administered to individuals outside a controlled medical environments, it can cause an individual to stop breathing, and a sufficient concentration can lead to death. This profile made it an ideal candidate for surreptitiously incapacitating or lethally harming an unsuspecting victim, leaving minimal outward trace of a struggle. The results of this expanded toxicology report were, as anticipated, definitive and damning. They provided the precise, unassailable scientific proof the investigators had relentlessly sought. The amount of propofol found in Tim's body was 0.18 milliliters, which is not something that a normal person would have in their system. The detective announced, the words resonating with profound weight. The mere presence of any propofol in Tim's system, let alone a measurable and significant amount, was unequivocally abnormal and deeply indicative of malicious intent. Forensic toxicologists confirmed the profound significance of this finding. That analytical finding is the propofol that's present in the blood, indicating detection in a critical biological fluid. The experts further elaborated that while the blood sample provided clear evidence, it doesn't go to show you where the propofol is present in other parts of the body. This detail was important because it suggested that the finding in the blood, while crucial, did not account for the entire propofol dose that was administered, implying a larger, likely fatal quantity had been introduced into Tim's system. The source of this powerful drug was, in light of the investigation, unequivocally clear. We did interviews. We were able to determine that Tim was not a drug user. Tim was not in the medical field. The detective stated definitively, eliminating any possibility of accidental ingestion or recreational use on Tim's part. There was no plausible, benign explanation for propofol to be present in his system, or to have been introduced by anyone other than someone with professional medical access. This biological extension pointed solely to Barb Pasa. She was the only individual in the household, and indeed within their close social circle, who possessed direct, professional access to such a controlled and specific medical substance. To solidify this critical link, investigators immediately engaged with hospital officials at Mercy One Medical Center, where Barb was employed, seeking to understand the intricate protocols and safeguards surrounding the handling and disposal of propofol. What they discovered about the hospital's specific disposal practices chillingly confirmed Barb's opportunity for illicit access. When propofol is used, if it's in a vial and say it's 10 milliliters and they only use 5, it can only be used one time, so it was thrown in the trash, the detective explained, outlining a standard medical waste management policy designed to prevent drug diversion and ensure patient safety. This strict protocol mandated that even partially used vials of controlled substances were to be discarded after a single use. This very protocol, ironically, created a specific, undetected loophole that Barb could exploit. Barb's job in the surgical center was to then dispose of those containers, placing her directly in the chain of custody for controlled substance disposal. The critical and easily exploitable detail was the physical nature of the containers themselves. The containers are such that Barb would be able to reach in and grab the small vial of propofol, stick it in a pocket, and no one would know anything different. The ease with which she could covertly obtain the fatal dose, unnoticed by her colleagues or the hospital system, completed the horrifying picture of premeditated murder. With Barb's direct access to the murder weapon, the powerful anesthetic, propofol, now undeniably confirmed, investigators pivoted to a meticulous re-examination of her carefully constructed timeline for the morning of the fire. Barb had consistently told police that she had departed from the house a little before 7 a.m., a crucial 30 minutes or more before the fire was officially reported. This timing was paramount to her alibi, placing her physically distant from the residence at the critical moment the fire began to rage. However, this carefully crafted narrative was about to be obliterated by the irrefutable testimony of Barb's own co-worker, Megan Desina, who presented powerful evidence to the contrary. On the morning of May 5th, as I was driving to work, I happened to notice that Barb's vehicle was at home, Megan recounted, her observation piercing the fabricated timeline. Her identification of the vehicle was absolute. I knew it was her vehicle based on the personalized plates that she had that spelled out Pasa, an unambiguous identifier in a small town. Megan's eyewitness account was not merely anecdotal. It was reinforced by objective, digital evidence. Megan has an app on her phone that she uses for her work, and it tracks where she's at certain times, the detective explained. This commercial GPS tracking feature, typically used for practical work purposes, inadvertently provided crucial time-stamped location data. She showed us this app, and it showed that she had been by that house at about 7:22 that morning. This irrefutable data directly contradicted Barb's self-proclaimed departure time. If Megan's vehicle, and therefore Megan herself, was passing the Pasa residence at 7:22 a.m., and she observed Barb's car still at home, then Barb could not possibly have left a little before 7 a.m. The timing window now became critical. About 10 minutes later, 7:33 or thereabouts, is when the 911 call was made that there was smoke coming out of the house. The extremely short period between Barb's vehicle being seen at her home and the fire being reported, a mere 11 minutes, suggested not only that Barb had been present far later than she claimed, but also chillingly implied that the fire might have been deliberately set and burning for A, while before her hurried departure. That's a pretty short period of time for somebody to be there and then gone. And that also starts to tell me that fire might have been going for a while before she actually left the house. The detective speculated, outlining the chilling implications of the tightened timeline. To further bolster these revised movements and confirm Barb's deceptive timeline, detectives again turned to an objective, irrefutable source, her financial records. That morning, she had gone to an ATM location here in Centerville and withdrew $200 from that ATM, the investigator revealed, detailing a time-stamped transaction that corroborated the timing of her exit. The electronic record of this withdrawal provided another precise piece of information. We were able to also get video from that ATM, which proved it was Barb and that she was in her vehicle at 7:25 a.m. in Centerville. This irrefutable video evidence, showing Barb at an ATM in Centerville at 7:25 a.m., further cemented the lie of her earlier departure time. The evidence, converging from multiple, independent sources, the autopsy, the interview inconsistencies, Barb's access to propofol, the co-worker's eyewitness account corroborated by her tracking app, and the ATM footage and financial records, now formed an inescapable web of truth. So having all this evidence between the autopsy, the interview, the different statements, the financial information, all led us to Barb was not being truthful with us, and that Barb was involved in the death attempt. And the fire at a residence, the detective declared, concluding the painstaking, systematic work of piecing together the incontrovertible truth. Every piece of the elaborate, tragic puzzle had finally clicked into place, undeniably pointing to Barbara Pasa as the perpetrator. Armed with this formidable, interlocking body of evidence, the undeniable autopsy results revealing no smoke inhalation, the presence of propofol in Tim's system, Barb's unique professional access to the drug, her demonstrably false alibi, and her compelling financial motive, investigators meticulously prepared and presented their case to the district attorney. The narrative they constructed for the prosecution was a grim and compelling one, detailing a woman driven to unthinkable extremes by a profound internal conflict. I think Barb was in a bad place financially. The prosecutor began laying out a primary, powerful external pressure that served as a catalyst for her actions. But beyond mere financial strain, her deepest motivation was rooted in a psychological compulsion. She wanted to appear to be the perfect family, have the perfect home, the perfect cars. This pervasive, desperate need for outward validation, for a flawless public persona, had become a suffocating burden, forcing her to live beyond her means and create a fabricated reality that was on the verge of collapsing. And I think it got to the point where she was not going to be able to uphold that appearance. And that's why she did what she did. The prosecutor articulated, framing the murder as a desperate, horrifying act to preserve a crumbling illusion. Barb snapped because she didn't want people to know the truth. She didn't want them to know that. Her life was not as it was portrayed. The fear of exposure, the terror of her manufactured reality dissolving, was not just a motivation. It was a psychological imperative that pushed her beyond the bounds of humanity. Based on a thorough and extensive investigation, in this case, a horrifyingly precise sequence of events was meticulously reconstructed and presented. We believe that sometime in the early morning, Barr was able to inject Tim with propofol. The prosecutor articulated, stating the initial fatal act of incapacitation. The stealthy, medically precise method perfectly explained Tim's unresponsiveness and the absence of any struggle. Once that took place, Barb then decided to try to destroy all possible evidence.